Hi, I'm Lawrence Rogers for TAMAPTA. Early last spring, the Wildlife Management Advisory Council for the North Slope awarded a contract to Danny C. Gordon of Aklavik to do an ecological and big game survey along the North Yukon corridor. This trip by snow machine would be an adventurous one, as this one is about the first one of its nature. We're glad that you could join us. Enjoy the program. After receiving the go-ahead from the Wildlife Advisory Council to do the survey, Danny and Annie C. Gordon of Aklavik, along with Joseph Allen, got an early start on preparations for the trip to the Yukon's North Slope. Danny explains on how he got to do the survey.
Putting in a proposal to do the work for WIMAC North Slope, counting muskox with skidoos, and my proposal was accepted.
The entire trip would take approximately 12 days and cover a lot of country. So taking those factors into consideration, Danny has to figure out how much gas and food to take on this trip. With all the food and equipment loaded onto 2 big komotiks and the 2 toboggans carrying the gas, we begin the trip by the river to our destination for that first leg of the journey. Danny C. Gordon explains the route we took and what our plans were for the rest of that day.
We've traveled approximately 75 miles by West Channel, Little Moose Channel, Fish River, Moose Channel, and finally to here at Police Cabin. 75 miles total. We're going to have lunch, and after lunch we'll be going inland, back into the hills there, back from Coal Mine, Whale Mountain, Rabbit River, and going all the way probably down over to Blow River, where Rabbit River comes out, and then coming back to Police Cabin to camp for the night. We're going to take in, look for moose, caribou, and muskox, and taking depth sounding for snow in different areas. About 25 centimeters.
We got an early start the next morning from Police Cabin, which is right on the NWT-Yukon border, and traveled to Blow River, which is about 30 kilometers away. Here, Danny has one of 5 houses that he uses on his many trips to the Yukon's North Slope. Again, he explains his plans from here.
Yeah, this is day 2 for our trip. We're going up into Blow River. We're going to do part of Rapid River that comes out up a couple of miles inland from Blow River, so that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking for moose, caribou, and muskox. I doubt if we're going to be seeing any muskox today, but hopefully some moose. We're also going to be doing some snow depth sounding today, 4 or 5 times along our trip, and sometime late this afternoon we should be returning back to our camp at Blow River.
With the work completed around the Blow River section and a brief stop for a lunch break, they packed their gear and moved camp to Shingle Point, which is about 20 kilometers from Blow River. Daddy's camp at Shingle Point is one of many that are built on a 2-mile-long sandspit. A lot of people stay down at the coast for the entire summer and fall here, hunting, and gathering for their winter supply. During the night, the weather had turned for the worst. Snowing, blowing, and whiteout conditions forced the survey to a halt for 3 days. During those days, they were stuck at shingle because of the weather. They had a chance to haul driftwood for their stoves for the coming summer season.
It is difficult to travel and do the count when you can't see more than 8 miles at least in all directions. We did do short trips here and there during that wind, and counting mostly, I guess, what we've seen along the way.
After the storm had blown itself out, Danny, Annie, and Joseph loaded up the sleds and began a long trip west toward Ptarmigan Bay. The first stop was at a place called Cape Point, where they stopped a few minutes to rest and clear the snow that had accumulated on the skidoos and sleds. The next was at Stokes Point, where Danny owns a small plywood house, and there is an unmanned dew-line station here as well. Then it was back on the trail to Ptarmigan Bay, which is 20 kilometers from Stokes Point. They arrived at the camp at 4:30 in the afternoon and quickly made a fire to warm the cabin, which is a small plywood house that Danny uses when he does his fishing and hunting in this area during the spring and summer months. This will be the base camp for the next 4 days. After unloading the sleds and a lunch break, they went across to Herschel Island. On the wind-swept hills off in the distance, Danny spotted a large dark object and stopped his machine to take a better look. It was a large male muskox near the tower. Danny and Joseph noticed some fresh caribou tracks on the snow, and they followed them to the land, and toward the middle of the island, they crested the hill and came upon about 50 caribou, which were feeding on the side of the hill. With all the caribou spotted on the island, they figure them to be around 300 animals in all. Danny takes snow depth measurements in a flat section. 10 other measurements are taken from that central location. Danny explains why he is doing this.
Snow depth measurements were for, I guess, just for the record, and out of the, when I was taking the depths, I kind of looked at the snow, whether it was hard snow, crushed, or was it icicles, frozen, and I entered some of that information into my report.
Danny and Joseph traveled to the ocean side of the island. They came upon another large male muskox where there was some vegetation visible amongst the craggy rocks. Looking out over the piled up ice, there was an open lead in the ice as far as the eye can see. After looking around for some time, the two went onto the ice and traveled by the shoreline of the island back to the camp at Ptarmigan Bay. The next day on the way to Firth River, Danny takes another snow depth measurement on the mainland and records it in his journal. They make quick time to the mouth of Firth River, as the snow is quite smooth in this section. Danny and Joseph stop at the foothills on the other side of the river. From here, they can see Igachak Hill. If a person were to climb to the top of it, they can see quite clearly in every direction. From stories of elders, this was used as the vantage point for finding game and watching for intruders in times of war. After traveling for a while along the foothills, the two came upon fresh moose tracks at Roland River. They followed them for some time, and finally they saw what seemed to be a cow moose and her calf. From where Danny and Joseph were standing, it was hard to determine what the other was, as it was lying in the willows and snow. Was it a calf or what? After observing the two animals for some time, they stood up and trotted out of the river. It was a couple of adult moose. They seemed to be in pretty good shape after the long winter. A westerly flow of fog was rolling in quickly, so the best idea was to head for the camp. Danny knows from previous experiences with whiteout conditions that looking for any kind of game would be almost impossible, and traveling with snow machines could very well be risking your life. Maybe tomorrow will be better weather. The plans for today was to go to the Alaska border. On the way there, Danny and Joseph stopped at an old campsite on what is known as Nunaluk Spit. Stopping only to look around for animals with their binoculars and looking at the awesome countryside, they continued on their way to the border. Kamakak Beach was their next stop on their way to the border. This is another unmanned dew-line station, but in years gone by, these places all had people taking care of them on a year-long basis. But because of advanced technology, they are now fully automated. The stop here was brief, and they continued on. A little further along the coast, Danny and Joseph stop and look around at a place called Clarence Bay. Danny explains what this place was used for.
It's a good harbor, and there is a store that used to be operated by Hudson's Bay many years back. When we came through there in 1946-47 with Doc Team coming to Canada, it was already abandoned. The store was shut down, so I think the story goes that it was only in operational for 2 years only, and then the place was shut down. The building is still there. It's quite old, but it can be fixed up. It's quite not that bad.
It's been a long and tiring trip to get to the place where there's a border between the Canadians and the Americans. Time for a rest and something to eat. Danny's parents probably passed by close to here on their journey from Alaska to settle in Canada sometime in the 1940s.
4 hours to here. Not quite.
A small monument is put here, and a lot of travelers have put their mark on it to say they have passed through here.
Demarcation point is, it's on Alaska, about 10 miles farther from the border, going west. Demarcation point has an Inuvialuit name, which means Pataktok, and that's the name for it. And it's a good harbor. And also there used to be a store that was operated by Gordons. I would imagine it was my grandfather or one of his first sons that were running a store there.
With the lunch break over, Danny decides that a measurement of the snow would be appropriate right about here.
Meters, centimeters. Just about 5.5. 5.5 is 14 centimeters.
After entering the data in his book, they decide to go directly inland from the tower. About halfway to the foothills, a small herd of musk oxen are spotted and counted: 2 bulls, 3 cows, and 3 calves. They were getting close to the hills when a larger group was spotted. This herd didn't know they were in the area until Danny went to get a closer look. When the animals stood up, Danny did a fast evaluation of the herd and counted 34 muskox, 4 bulls, 4 calves, and the rest seemed to be cows. Leaving the awesome sight, Danny and Joseph followed the foothills back to the camp at Ptarmigan Bay. The plan for the day is to move back to Shingle Point. With the weather at -17 and cloudy, it is not too bad a day for traveling. From Shingle Point, Danny decides one last trip up towards Sleepy Mountain and then east toward Akpoyochak. Danny and Joseph did another snow measurement between the ocean and the mountains.
Yeah, they're way up, I think. Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of time. Down here too. Yeah, point in the middle.
Upon reaching Running River, Danny noticed that fog was rapidly approaching and decided to go directly to the camp. On the way back to the camp, quite a number of caribou were spotted a ways back from Bar 2. Today they would start for Aklavik, and what a day for traveling. Weather was clear and crisp. Right after breakfast, everything was loaded and they were off toward the Delta once again. The route back was basically the same as when they were starting the survey. Reaching police cabin, the group stopped to take a rest and to make sure everything was all right, and they continued on. Some 4 hours later, Danny, Annie, and Joseph pulled into the community. They had traveled approximately 1,100 kilometers during the entire survey.
It's finished, I think.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Thanks also to Danny, Annie, and Joseph for an exciting trip, and to the Wildlife Management Advisory Council out of Whitehorse in their thoughtfulness for funding this trip. And to you viewers, for watching, good night.